What's going on, everybody? You are listening to the Co-Living Show. My name is Craig Curlop,
Miller McSwain.
and we've got a very special guest for you today, Mrs. Suzanne. I actually forget her last name.
You guys will hear it when we start up in a few minutes.
Yeah, yep. Funny, not so funny story is that the original guest for today had, her dog just had to get put down, which is super sad. But we had a fill in with Suzanne, and Suzanne just absolutely crushed it. I don't know. I don't know if the other person could have crushed it more, honestly. Suzanne, I don't know how she could have done better. So Suzanne really laid it down. We get into a lot of cool things in this episode, like who should use PadSplit, who shouldn't use PadSplit, what is PadSplit, what are the benefits, what are you trying to do, where is PadSplit headed, all this stuff. So she is like a host success manager at PadSplit. So you definitely want to listen to this episode if you're on PadSplit, and you want to listen to the episode if your strategy has been to be off PadSplit but follow in their shadows. So really good episode.
Yeah, and we even get to cover some things like what are different markets around the country like. So that's one thing that PadSplit is unique in, right? They operate in probably at this point, I guess, all 50 states. And Suzanne kind of had some insight into cheaper markets. How do those perform for co-living? More expensive markets like hers in Seattle, how is that performing? And also, they just opened up the Seattle market for PadSplit. So it opened, I don't know, a few months ago. So that's fresh off the block and a potential opportunity that she talks about whenever you become a early adopter of a city and an early adopter of a strategy. So we'll dive into all that in today's episode.
Love it. Dude, we just got back from a conference.
We did.
We didn't even talk about it.
Yeah. Where'd we go?
We went to Austin, Texas for the REI Summit, Brandon's event, and it was super fun, man. What did you grab out of it?
I think for me, I think it evolves over time. So for you guys who are beginners, I remember going to my first 2 or 3 years of conferences, and it's intimidating, but everything is about learning at the sessions and then networking with as many people as possible at the events. So that's kind of how it is in the beginning. I think you go to this co-living session, you go to PadSplit even had a meetup there. So Craig and I got to go interact with some of the PadSplit advisors and some hosts and some people interested in co-living. So you get to do all that. You get to do the networking, you get to do the education. I think as I've progressed, I go to the sessions a little bit less, even though I pay for the ticket. I don't always walk into the room. It's a little bit more of interacting with people that I've met at previous conferences and continuing to grow relationships a little bit more than like getting a million intros to all these people. But that's my life cycle. How do you think about it, Craig?
I actually couldn't agree more. I think like in the early stages when you're figuring out, you kind of want to go to the sessions almost as like a reprieve because networking can be exhausting. But I would really urge, if you are a conference goer or you're starting to go to conferences, like I always have a goal to get at least 5 new phone numbers every day. So if it's a 3-day conference, I'm walking out of there with at least 15 new phone numbers, and I usually crush that goal. And then also like to follow up with them after the conference is also super important. So yeah, the connections that you make will be better and bigger than anything, worth way more than the ticket itself. The sessions, honestly, it's good. I honestly go in there as like a reprieve sometimes. Just, okay, I want to sit for a minute. I want to just take something in. But most of that stuff you can find on YouTube. So,
yeah. Yep. Couldn't agree. Awesome.
Cool. All right. It is about time to get into today's episode with Miss Suzanne from PadSplit. Suzanne Vetillart, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Miller and Craig.
Did I do okay with your last name?
Yes. Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
You said it like 10 seconds before we started recording, so I was like...
No, it's perfect.
Locked in. Don't ask me again in 10 minutes, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Suzanne, tell us about your PadSplit. You're basically like a host advisor, and we're here to glean as much information from you today as we can at how do we get our PadSplit listeners and PadSplit hosts to get the most amount of value out of their properties using all the stuff that PadSplit has. So I guess that's the gist. But Suzanne, why don't you just tell us, who are you, why are you on this show, and why do you have the credibility to talk on this stuff?
Yeah, I joined PadSplit pretty recently in January, so a couple months ago. So I'm new to PadSplit, but I'm not new to investing. I've been investing in the Seattle metro market for over 8 years. And one of the reasons why I started to pay attention to what PadSplit was doing was I just see compressed markets. I see cash flow tightening. I see numbers not penciling. And so I really have been paying attention to what PadSplit has been doing in the last 12 months. And when I saw an opportunity to join the company and be on the inside to see what they're doing and to learn about how they're growing, I was like, this is a great opportunity for me. So yeah, I made the jump. Again, just still learning a lot too. But what's really exciting is that I'm seeing firsthand that there is just so much demand for what members or people looking for affordable housing or looking for a rent by room. There's so much demand in expensive markets like Seattle. And so that's been really wonderful for me to see that this is going to be a growing opportunity. And if you're a real estate investor, this is really where you want to look at, because this isn't something that's going to become saturated in a year. It's just going to continue to grow. And you look at the macro kind of situation of our country, and we're on the right side of things when you look at this for real estate investors.
What I love about co-living is that we're truly creating like this. I suppose co-living's been around for a while with the hippie community and all that, but it's been very niched before. The fact that co-living is becoming mainstream, it's truly becoming an asset class of its own. And so I do want to ask, just to kick it off, one, who is PadSplit for? And then two, who is PadSplit not for under the umbrella of co-living investor?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when I have been able to go and look at markets that have been established and see hosts that have scaled this and they've got 50 or 90 rooms under their portfolio, I think PadSplit is really built for those portfolio investors. What they're able to do is to save a lot of their time and energy and use the playbook and the systems that PadSplit has figured out. And then they're just able to focus on acquisition. This is not for someone who's got one property that they're just trying to turn into some side business and that they're not planning to scale this. I think that's really who PadSplit works best for. And so a lot of times, if you're new to co-living or rent by room, I always recommend and see that the best way to learn is do the first one with PadSplit, learn everything you can, and then you're on the track to scale. If you take that playbook, once you've done your first property or second, maybe, then you can hand it off to your team, right? You've got maybe your systems in place, you've got a property manager, and now you can focus on acquisition and scaling.
Perfect. Okay. So it sounds like property number one is you go on PadSplit to test it, but you're wanting to scale under the presumption you're going to scale. Like at what point, let's say someone wants 5 properties, they each cash flow $2,000 each. That's $10,000 of passive income. They're good with that. Are they a PadSplit host?
Yeah, I think that's, again, everyone is different. And so there's really people who get on the platform and they want to be very involved and they don't need 5 properties. They might be good with 2 or 3. And so that's what I really love about PadSplit is that it's depending on your goals and you work backwards with the numbers, you can set like the amount of time and energy, the amount of, I guess, outsourced kind of teams that you want to build or have. And also, I would say just like your investment. And so that's really why my role exists as a host advisor, is really to kind of work with people who have all these goals and they're trying to get somewhere with real estate. And it's a combination of like their investment, their time, their energy, and obviously like the financial returns. But one thing that I've really learned recently from some of my other host advisors in other markets, this is a shout out to Dominique Rice. She really has found that with her hosts, they're actually very mission driven. When you think about someone I've got a house, nobody's using it, I could provide affordable housing for people that actually need it, and I'm solving a problem, it's a win-win for everyone. And so when people get to see the side where when you say affordable housing, there might be a stereotype around it, but these are just people like you and I, right? That just need another way to maybe save some money. And so when you see that impact that you're able to do on the member side, I think that also really motivates hosts or people who are in a position to own real estate and have more real estate to be like, okay, I can solve a problem. I can make some money. This is win-win for everyone.
Cool. Awesome. So Suzanne, not every co-living investor uses PadSplit, right? Like me and Craig are co-living investors. We're not personally on the platform. So we wanted to bring you on here to get that out to everybody. But so I'm curious though, what specifically does PadSplit provide super tactically? Like what parts of the software or the platform are useful to co-living investors that maybe enhance their experience versus managing off platform, and kind of maybe some features that make their lives easier and help them operate in a more like streamlined way?
Yeah, I'll speak from my own experience of having long-term rentals. Like the four things that like I hate the most about being a landlord is number one is like setting up the listing. And so having to put it on all these channels and take the photos and put everything up. And then the second piece that I really hate is like the showings. On my weekend, I might have to take my Saturday and wait for people to come see the listing and they don't even show up. So I've lost my whole weekend. The other one is the leases, dealing with the leases and signing them and having all the paperwork. And then the other piece is like collecting payment. If you're dealing with multiple properties and multiple people, you've got to follow up when there's like late payments, enforce maybe late payment fees. So just like the collection side of all of that. So those are like four things that I love that PadSplit does. And I'll add a bonus one is really the vacancy piece. I have a long-term rental. And so when I come in and I have a lease expiring, I've basically got to find a new person. And so I might have 1 or 2 months of vacancy. And that actually adds up, right? That can be really expensive. And then not only that, it's like I've got to deal with the issue of like basically like cleaning up the unit. I might have to repaint everything. I might even have to redo the kitchen because it's in bad shape. And so, what you have with, I say, a co-living property in comparison is like you've got better eyes on your property to maintain the property over time, right? So you might not have that big cost to turn the unit. I think on PadSplit, we average it to about $75 in between different members moving in and out. And so for me, that could be like a couple $1,000s for one of my units.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a huge benefit that is overlooked, that with your long-term rental, you don't get inside for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, sometimes if you have a tenant that's there for a long time, which
Yeah.
sounds great. But then when you get in there and have to spend 10 grand
Oh,
fixing
yeah.
everything. Yeah. With co-living, we're in and out of these properties on a monthly basis with cleaners and the whole deal. Yeah. That is a big benefit. And just to kind of get straight on the definition, because I hear this just being like muddled a little bit with newer investors coming in the space and not quite understanding, is PadSplit a property manager? And like how involved is the investor when they're using PadSplit?
That's a really great question. And I feel like it always gets confused. And so that's one of the things I always have to clarify. PadSplit isn't a property manager. Really, we're just the software and the system that helps you to streamline your operations. And so we're not coming in and helping people. We're not like holding people's hands to get them in and out of properties. If the bathroom has an issue, like we're not in the property to fix something like that. So that's really like under kind of the host, right? The host has to understand what their role is. And again, that's how we have these host advisors like myself to work with people onboarding onto the platform. And it's really to explain that this is your property, this is your asset, right? You can manage and you can be whatever kind of host you want to be and manage your property the way you want. And PadSplit gives you the systems behind to make that really streamlined. But I think it's really, it can be confusing for people who are just learning about this. What is it that you actually do and not do? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I hear a lot of people relate it to Airbnb, and I think it's a good analogy. So if you were to buy a short-term rental, yeah, like you could do like me and Craig, and you could be posting on different places and gathering your tenants from a lot of different sources. But if you do source them from Airbnb, there are fees associated with doing that, but that they're handling similar things to what you guys do, like paperwork. Like you're not going on Airbnb and signing a lease with whoever's coming. The platform kind of takes care of things like that. It takes care of bringing in the payments and reminding them about the payments and getting those all delivered to you. And they do that for a fee. Now, the investor is still very involved. Like they are, like in the Airbnb example, they're still making the listing, responding to tenants or guests and all that kind of stuff. So if they want to be hands off, then they're hiring a property manager in addition to being on Airbnb. So how often do you see investors adding a property management layer over the PadSplit? Like how many people are using property managers in addition to, and who should be considering doing that versus just using PadSplit themselves?
I think if you don't have the time to learn the operation side, because maybe you've got a W 2 and you're super busy, and this is purely an investment, then people will want to bring in a property manager on day one or even before you go live. But let's say that this plans to be like your main business, and maybe you are in a W-2, but you plan to leave it and just go full time into real estate. It might make sense for you to operate the first one or the second one. And then you're bringing in a team, right, who understands how to property manage not just any asset, right? They understand property management specifically for co-living because it's not the same thing. And I met some property managers in Phoenix who were career property managers for long-term rentals or short-term rentals, and they all switched because their investors moved and they had to learn this new playbook, right? It's not the same type of management. And so that's what I would really look for if anyone knows that they want to be hands off, look for a property manager who does co-living and understands it themselves.
Yeah, I see a lot of people fall into that trap. Hey, I already have some long-term rentals. I want to get more cash flow. I talked with my property manager and they said, "Yep, we'll take on room rentals. We'll give it a shot." And really what I tell people is the management of co-living, like it looks sort of similar, but it's 80%, 90% different than long-term rentals. Just like how the acquisition is a good bit different too, right? You're looking for different things. On the PM side, you're marketing in different places. You're dealing with tenant conflicts, something that they probably don't have to deal with in a single family house traditionally. So yeah, that's definitely look for a co-living specialty there. And maybe just one more question for you, kind of just about the platform. If you don't mind, what are the fees associated with PadSplit so the listeners can know that?
Yeah, so our fees are basically we charge 8% across gross revenue that's collected. And then we do charge a 10-day booking fee, which is similar to a lease up, right? So if I have a long-term rental and I have 12-month lease that I'm signing with a new tenant, I have to pay 1 month potentially of that lease to a broker or someone who helped me find the tenant. So our 10 days is actually just really to cover our marketing costs. And really, at the end of the day, it's if you have someone staying in your property for 6 months or more, you've just paid 10 days, right? But they've stayed for 6 months or 8 months even. One of the things that I think makes PadSplit different from Furnish Finders or Airbnb is really that we're built for tenure. So we get people into properties really fast. We're really great at that, but we want them to stay. We don't want them to churn, and we don't want you to have to go through members moving in and out. And so that's why, as a host advisor, we really work with the host to make sure that the members are happy. Because at the end of the day, like members are, or what we call members are the tenants, they're the ones that drive all of this, right? And so if they're not having a good experience, that sort of domino effect, right? Of if the host is unhappy because members aren't happy, it's really not what we want. And yeah, I think the 10-day booking fee is what we have for placing a tenant in. But let's say that you are able to find your own people and bring them into your property, we waive that fee.
Perfect. Just some other things, like in terms of if, let's say I'm new to PadSplit, but I want to be on PadSplit, what are the things that we absolutely have to do? So each room is furnished. Is there anything else?
Which is unique, I guess, just to point out, you guys do require that the room is furnished, right? Which not like Craig and I don't always do that, for example.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's really what we've learned across 30 different markets and after having 70,000 members is that we're really focused on booking velocity. So we want people to be able to move in quickly. And so if we have furnished or unfurnished, it's like people have to think about moving and they've got to hire a mover and they've got to bring stuff in. So we simplify it for members so that the furnishings are really basic. They're not like Airbnb level. So really it's just like we require you to have a bed frame, mattress topper. You don't need to provide bedding or linens, and then a desk and a side table and just like an additional lamp or fixture. And so those kind of basic things are really tied to the fact that we want members to come in. They can move in with a toothbrush and they can bring in what they need as they need. But if I need a room in 48 hours, I could find one on PadSplit, right? And that could make sense for me. Because when you think about it, you're not only, when people are moving into new properties, they're not just paying for the monthly or the weekly rate. They're really paying the deposit, right? Moving fees. Maybe they don't have furniture. So all of those costs really add up for the people that are looking for affordable housing. And just they get really priced out of Most people don't even have money for a 1 month's deposit, right? So let alone like all these other things that they're going to need to have if they move into a new property, a new house.
Do you also require the common areas to be furnished? And what are those requirements?
So for the common areas, it really, I think, goes back to the investor, the host. Some properties don't have their common areas are pretty sparse because what they find is that people living in these properties are really not at home a lot. They're not hanging out in the living room and watching TV or on the couch. They're really working. They might be working two jobs even, and they might be eating a lot of their meals outside the house as well. And
Mhm.
so for some of the properties that I've seen that are, I would say, really built for co-living specifically, it's like they might have a dining table with some seats. They don't necessarily have a couch and a TV area, but they do have some armchairs where some people could come and relax. And so I think it really is up to the property owner what they want in their house, right? But you don't have to, we don't require those things for the common areas, right? I think just a simple dining table.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. I don't know if you guys have this data or not, because I don't know if it's entered into the platform. But do you know how many hosts are like providing common areas versus not? Because I'd be really curious to see, are rents affected by that, or does it really not matter that much?
I think there's probably a way could look up that data, but what I would say from maybe the member side and what I've heard from different hosts is that for some hosts, they really rely on having kind of a living room common area space. But I've also heard people that had that and then they eventually turned it into an additional room because nobody used it.
Hmm.
And so it could be one of those things where you test it or among your members, or you can even ask, right, people in your house, do you need this space or want it, and make a decision to convert later. But I think at the end of the day, most people are not really using those common areas as much as we think they might.
One thought I had too is we use cameras on the common areas. And so we could probably set up some sort of device or something that can track, like, hey, how often are people actually like
Yeah.
in the living
Hmm.
room?
Yeah.
And if it is never or seldom, then it would make sense to convert it. But if they are hanging out, then
Yeah.
let it be.
Yeah, in fact, just so everyone knows, we just started using Wise as our camera provider. We switched from Blink,
Mm.
and Wise has AI type stuff built into it. So you literally could query it and say, "Show me the clips where someone is present in the living room," or "Show me if anyone's watching TV or whatever." And you could literally tally all that up. Hey, how often are people playing board games? How often are they looking at the TV? How often are they in there interacting with another resident? Even you could pull a lot of that data out of there. But I will just say personally, I haven't done that search that Craig was just talking about to tally it up. But we lived in our first two co-living houses as house hacks. So we were living in there and we were renting out the other rooms. And we did kind of find that people didn't use the common space a whole lot in our first house, for sure. Like my wife and I lived in the basement. We didn't really interact with them much. Kind of like you're saying, they had jobs, they would kind of come in and out. When we moved to our second house, it was that way until we started sparking some community engagement. Because, yeah, I think by default, people are coming into these houses and moseying through the hallways and not interacting because they don't know anybody and they're kind of just sticking to themselves. But once we started providing some opportunities for them to meet everyone else, whether it's them like the pizza night that we always talk about or whatever sort of event we'll throw, I think that kind of opened people up out of their shell a little bit. And then we did start to see some engagement, but it wasn't without us trying. It didn't happen
Yeah.
naturally, for sure. Uh, cool. So maybe another just like tactical question, because PadSplit does operate pretty uniquely compared to a lot of other rental strategies, a lot of other operators around the country. Can you talk a little bit about the membership route, the membership agreement, and how that's different than a lease, and maybe why you guys do go that membership route?
Yes. So what I think makes PadSplit a little bit different is like the leasing structure. So with PadSplit, if you're a host and you want to list with PadSplit, it is an exclusive listing. So you can't continue to list on Airbnb and Furnish Finder and PadSplit all at the same time. And the reason why we do that is because we want everyone in the house to be on the same sort of rules, have the same sort of understanding, right, of what is house rules and agreement and communication. And the hosts that list with PadSplit will sign a lease with PadSplit. And then PadSplit will basically create a lease with all of the members or tenants. We call them members in the house. And so that way the host isn't having to go one by one and having to do these individual leases with people coming in and out of their house. And it's a loophole that has really worked for PadSplit to be able to do co-living across all municipalities across the country and not have to delist any one of our properties. Because with co-living and having unrelated people in the house, every municipality has like different rules around it. And so we found that's really what's been able to work. And then again, from my own experience of having to deal with leases myself, it's just like, I don't want that headache to have to remember, right? Like what needs to be in a lease and renewals and things like that. And so I think it takes the headache away for the host or the investor who just is like, I don't want to deal with that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's helping you clear some regulatory hurdles by going the membership route. Can we dive just a little bit deeper on that? What specific regulations are you guys running into, and which regulations should co-living investors be concerned with? And like, why does the membership method help with that whenever a leasing standard lease may not? Hey guys, the tool I've been talking about forever, Co-Living Pro, is now officially live. So some of the biggest problems that I've encountered around co-living are always on the marketing side. So you can think of Co-Living Pro as a marketing software or a tool to help you overcome some of these marketing issues that we all run into in the co-living space. So number one, it helps you determine what to price your room at and then how to change that price over time. And that's actually a free tool. You can go there to colivingpro.io, and there's a little like rentometer type tool where you can punch in an address, punch in a zip, punch in a city, and kind of see what rooms might rent for there. But it does that for you. And number two, historically, for us to keep our rooms operating at full capacity, especially when we're off of PadSplit, it's meant that we had to post on Zillow, post on Zumper, post on Apartments, post on Roomies, post on all these places. And with just a 5-bedroom house, that's already 20 listings right there, which is a lot of work, a lot of time and effort. So Co-Living Pro helps you solve this. You just make your listing on this one site and it pushes it to Zillow, pushes it to Zumper. And we even support any platform with the manual listing manager. So you can still be on Apartments, still be on Roomies, still be on PadSplit, still be on anything. And it's kind of a wizard that helps you stay organized, your VA stay organized. It shows you what rooms need to be posted where with just quick copy paste prompts. Copy your rent over, copy your description over, boom, you're good to go. And number three, historically, now that you're on all these sites, we always had to hop in daily or at least weekly to keep these listings up at the top, keep the pricing up to date. So Co-Living Pro solves that for you too. It's making those adjustments for you on a daily basis, even an hourly basis, to make sure your listings are updated across your platforms. So you guys know everything I've always done has been free. The community is free. This podcast is free. I'm super proud of that and definitely going to keep doing all that. But this tool is paid, but I feel comfortable doing that because the numbers are honestly pretty insane. So if you go to Co-Living Pro, there is a calculator where you can do this for your own situation. But let's take that example earlier of the 1 5-bedroom property. From that, we estimate you'll make an extra $1,400 a year in extra rent and reduced vacancy. And that is 5x what the tool costs. Let me say that again. This tool produces 5x the return of what it costs. So in this example, that's actually a better return than most co-living properties themselves, being around 15, 16%. So head over to colivingpro.io. This is the tool that I built for my own business, and I'm so happy that I can finally share it with you guys. And back to the episode. Okay. Yeah, and so you said that you're in the Seattle market, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about the regulation and get like a little bit more specific, just because, and we'll apply it generally so people can understand it across the country. But like we were talking about a little bit before, me and Craig were looking into different cities around Washington kind of recently. And so we've done some research. And even whenever I was writing the co-living book for Bigger Pockets, I wrote in there like how friendly Washington is towards co-living. They were the first state to set some regulation statewide that said, hey, cities, you can't limit the number of unrelated people that live together. As long as it's safe, you should be allowing more than 5 people to live together if it helps out with our like affordability type problems. Mm-hmm. Is that your understanding? That's kind of what passed in like 2020, 2021, something like that?
Yeah, I think it's like HB 1998 that we have that allows you to basically have like 8 people who are unrelated living in the same property. When I talk about the opportunity in the Seattle metro area, I think what I like to share is like the macro situation that like compared to maybe an Airbnb, what we're providing with rent by room and co-living properties is basically workforce housing or housing that's more affordable for people. And so even if we have issues, it's like when you zoom out, in Seattle specifically, like this is a huge issue,
Hmm.
housing affordability. So even if there are complaints or whatever, it's like we're on the right side of things. And I know like I've read reports from like local organizations that are really looking at trying to, what do we do about affordable housing? But doing co-living, doing a pad split is one of the most affordable ways to provide housing today now fast, and it's the most cost effective way to do it. And so I've gone to different like YIMBY groups and different like groups that are talking about emergency housing, affordable housing, but I still think pad split and co-living is like probably the smartest and cheapest way for us to be able to do this. So I think for people who are like worried about like zoning or worried about, am I going to get citations or something? I would really zoom out and say, like, you're essentially doing what people want, right? Like our mayor in Seattle, or a lot of people are talking about we need more affordable housing. So you have to see that you're on the right side of things, right? That's different from providing an Airbnb that's for someone coming in and out on a vacation. We're talking about totally different demographic and different solution that we're providing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm totally with you. We're on the right side of things here. If you think about short-term rentals that are coming into a market, like awesome, that provides a lot of cash flow. Co-living provides a lot of cash flow. But a short-term rental is taking away housing from long-term residents of that area. That's just how it works. And so that is increasing rents for locals. Whereas with co-living, we're doing the opposite. We're providing super affordable housing. So it sounds like all legislators and all these government officials should be on board with what we're doing, but it's not necessarily always the case. So, for example, Craig and I have a property in Denver or near Denver where we thought that we were operating totally fine. Similar to Washington, we have this regulation statewide in Colorado that says you can have unlimited people living together, no big deal. But we ended up hitting a zoning issue
Hmm.
instead that was a little bit different. And I saw some signs of things like that in Washington too. So I wonder if you've heard of this part of the regulation. But when we were looking, that House bill that you talked about in 1998 or whatever it is, did allow for the unlimited occupants to live together. But then another housing bill passed. I forget when, it was like a year or two ago, that went even further. It sounded super positive. So this is why I started looking in Washington. It
Hmm.
went even further and said that, hey, co-living, room rentals, I think it specifically says co-living, must be allowed in zonings that allow 6 units on the lot or more. It was something like that, like six plexes and bigger should be all good. But what we saw is whenever I started talking with some of these cities when we were figuring out where we want to go, and there were two of them were around Seattle that I was talking to, they took that House bill, the new one, and like totally used it to their advantage and started blocking co-living with it. So
Hmm.
their interpretation of the bill was that, hey, we have to allow co-living in six plexes or bigger. But then they started saying that less than 6 units, you're not allowed to rent rooms anymore. So they kind of twisted it and started canceling people who were less than that. And in fact, it was kind of hard for us to find a city that did not interpret it that way. I had to go in front of a city council and present my case
Wow.
to get them to allow us to do room rentals there. Have you seen anything about that 6 unit legislation?
That's new for me. I haven't heard that specifically, and I want to dig into that a little bit more to understand it, how it affects potential property owners here. But I think to the point of like maybe starting at 6 bedrooms even, right, for your property, that does make sense just in terms of what's going to make sense for your investment. I know that some hosts, they only do 8 bedrooms, right?
Mhm.
Or they're looking to acquire properties that have the potential for 8 bedrooms. So I would say that's not a bad starting place, because if you've got a property and you've got maybe 3 bedrooms or even four, if you've got one vacancy, you've
Mhm.
already, maybe you're not cash flowing anymore. And so it is, again, investments have all their risks and everybody has to be comfortable, right, with some of the unknowns. And so I think that goes back to the host and the investor themselves. Like, where are you comfortable with this? The opportunity as an early adopter is that we are in a gray area when we go into something like this. But that's what makes you an early adopter, is like it's not proven and saturated to enough where everybody's trying to do it. And so I think that's just like the balance that you have to find.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I'm with you. Being an early adopter is there's a lot of benefits to it, but there is some risk. So I guess just generally, and then I'll hush for a little bit. For anyone who's looking for a new co-living market, whenever you hear these super positive news articles about, oh, there's positive co-living regulation here and things like that, I would still approach the city planner or
Yeah.
whoever's in charge in that area, because that's where we found out that some cities were trying to oppose the legislation and not allow us to operate there. And if we would have just bought a property and then they started coming after us, like that wouldn't be a good deal to have just put 150,000 buying a house or whatever. So definitely check on your local laws, not just at the state level.
Okay, so from my understanding, anybody can open up a PadSplit anywhere, right? But there's tremendous advantage to being in a PadSplit primary market where PadSplit's putting marketing dollars towards that market. For someone that is a bit agnostic as to where they invest, where would you say is the top 3 places where PadSplit is really trying to grow and they're putting a lot of marketing dollars towards it?
I think if you're an investor who wants proven numbers and there's like data that shows that the market is doing really great, obviously where PadSplit started, Atlanta, that's where we have the most units. And PadSplit is just really known. Like you go on the street and people know PadSplit. Atlanta is a good place to look. I would also look at Florida. So a market like maybe Tampa or Orlando, Jacksonville, I heard is doing exceptionally well. We have a really high occupancy rate there. And then I think another market is in Texas, Houston. I think those are obviously really great markets for someone who wants to just get into the investment and there's some data that's backing some of the numbers. And that's really truly one of the things that PadSplit does so well is we really market and we get the sort of name out there for the members, right? So the people that are looking for this type of category of housing, rent by room, if they're interested, if they start looking for rent by room Seattle, like they're going to get a ton of marketing around all of the listings available. And so I think that's one of the things that hosts really have to understand is like when you come and work with PadSplit and you list your property, there's no one else who's going to market your listing as much as PadSplit. And that's really where we spend a lot of money and time.
Is there like any sort of advantages to being in a new market because in a emerging market because you've got less room, so less competition, you're putting marketing dollars towards it. And so like just like the supply demand thing, or am I not thinking about that correctly? Is it more just like it's better to be somewhere where it's tried, true, and understood?
Yeah, it's absolutely an advantage to be an early adopter in a market because basically Seattle's a new core market, so we're marketing heavily. And so right now we've got 53 rooms, right? So if you're one of those 53 rooms, we're marketing that to the thousands and thousands of eyes that we have looking for rent by room. And so I think that's one of the things that like early adopters maybe can jump in and take advantage of in these new emerging markets that PadSplit is opening up is that you're early and just like ratio wise, like your listing is not going to be seen by as many people if you're just marketing it on your own, right? And you're like putting it on Facebook or Furnish Finders. People are not going to find your listing as fast and you're not going to get bookings as quickly, right? But if you want the velocity, like the booking velocity to just come to you and it's not your headache, that's where PadSplit is really a great partner for you.
Yeah, and shameless plug here, if you're looking to go into any market and you need someone to help on the acquisition side and you need a good investor friendly agent, reach out to us. We've got a huge network of investor agents that specialize in co-living. So just shoot me a DM on Instagram and we'll get you hooked up.
Awesome. And then maybe one more thing to point out here. So you can go to PadSplit and look at all this data too. So even though, I don't know if I should say this or not, but even though Craig and I aren't on PadSplit, you can still sign up like as a host and it gives you access to start looking, zooming around the map. You can look at these different markets. You could click into Seattle and you guys actually give some really good data on every one of the markets. Like how many rooms are there?
Yeah.
What's the occupancy? What zip codes are they in? How many are private beds? How many are shared baths? Yeah. So some of that data is really valuable, whether you're on PadSplit or not. So regardless, you guys should at least sign up and get access to that and take a look.
Yeah, I like to double click that because I think we're all in this kind of co-living, rent by room, affordable housing solution. And so PadSplit has a lot of great data. And so definitely use the resources that we have because the more that you can be educated about your zip code or the area you want to invest, I think it's the better for everyone.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. And then I love that term, double click. So if we could double click a little bit into Seattle, can you tell us a little bit about how that launch has gone? Like when did PadSplit launch there? You mentioned the number of rooms, but I guess how is like time to fill and like occupancy? Like how is some of that looking in a brand new market?
Yeah, so I have the numbers in front of me. So we basically have 53 active units. It's on average 14 days to first booking. And the weekly price for a private bath is around $337 a week. So a month, that might be like $1,300 a month for a private bath. And then in the last 30 days, we've had 2,186 searches for rent by room on PadSplit. So if you go on to PadSplit's platform and you're looking at our listings, we really just have like more eyes looking than the available units. So again, that goes back to the early adopter opportunity is if I've got a property owner that we listed recently in Everett, Washington, and he had his first booking in the first 48 hours.
Mm.
And he hasn't been on the platform for 30 days yet, but he's already at 80% occupancy.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. And some of those rents that you mentioned there are pretty high, which is
Yeah.
awesome. So when investors are out here looking for markets, right? You guys operate in some cheaper markets like Atlanta, like Houston. You operate in expensive markets too, like Seattle. So how should investors compare that, right? If they're kind of like Craig said earlier, if they're market agnostic, how should they look at a market like Atlanta, cheaper prices, lower rents versus like you just quoted some pretty high rents for the private bathroom, at least in Seattle, where there's maybe a house is $700,000, $800,000, but you're getting more rent. Like, how should investors decide between those two options?
I think an expensive market like Seattle, what is really great is that if you look at the historical sort of last 10 years of the real estate market, you're building equity in your real estate year over year. And at the same time, if you can do a leasing strategy that cash flows better for you, that's going to beat a long-term rental like every day. So I think Seattle, an expensive market like Seattle works for a real estate investor who maybe has a little bit more money to put down, and they're going to hold the property for 5 or 10 years. They're going to let the property appreciate. And in the meantime, they're going to make more money by doing rent by room and co-living than they would with a long-term rental. And so I just think it's a great opportunity because we do have real estate investors right now who are just not cash flowing and they're stuck, or they're doing short-term rentals and they're dealing with like seasonality, right? And you've got like months where they just have too much vacancy. And so this is like an alternate. This is for someone who's already got a property, but there's still also someone who doesn't have a property yet and wants to acquire. I think as long as a property has enough bedrooms, I would say is big enough, right? Like more than 6 bedrooms, maybe ideally even 8.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to make more money than any other leasing strategy. And if you are a good operator, if you've got your team in place, you could stabilize the property and do really well for the next 5 years, or however long you want to manage you own your property, because the affordable housing issue is not going to be solved in 5 years, right? This is not going to go away. And I think the macro kind of situation is showing us that this is just only going to grow, right? The demand for this is going to grow.
Do you guys have any data on, because your main markets, Houston, Atlanta, and like Florida, all cheaper markets, but now you're expanding into some more expensive markets like Denver and Seattle. Have you noticed any differences in terms of occupancy, in terms of adaptability from hosts, stuff like that?
So you mean like hosts who've invested in multiple markets?
More so, just like what are the differences between a market where the average price is like 600,000 or 700,000 versus a average market where the price is 200,000 or 300,000?
Yeah, I think your cash on cash in Seattle is not going to compare at all, right? And so it really, I think it's fitting to an investor who is local, right? And maybe wants to invest locally, and they believe in the strength of the Seattle market over time in the long term. And in the meantime, they just want to cash flow better than if they did a short-term rental or something else. And so
Okay, last question on the markets. What about the non-primary markets? Let's say I wanted to open up a house in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where we live. I don't think you guys are here as a primary market. Does that make sense for me?
So the difference between a core and a non-core market for PadSplit specifically is really just the marketing piece. You won't have as many dollars from PadSplit going into like rent by room Coeur d'Alene. And so again, you might have no problem finding tenants to move into your property. You can list basically anywhere in the country, but that's really why a lot of the people that list with PadSplit come to us, is because that sort of booking velocity and us being able to get members into your property really quick.
So then in this case, we would be using PadSplit's platform, but we would probably be doing most of the efforts to get the rooms filled. And so then we would bypass that initial first 10-day for free type thing, right? And we would just be paying the 8% to use the platform.
That's right. Yeah. So you probably be using it more for not having to deal with the listing and the leases and payment collections and things like that.
Gotcha. Okay, that's super helpful. Okay, I want to move on to maybe this is our last legitimate series of questions, but what is PadSplit's biggest problem right now?
I think again, I'm a new person to PadSplit. I've been in the organization for 90 days. Our mission is basically to solve the affordable housing crisis. And so I know from a very high level, our biggest issue is maybe even the stigma or the stereotype of what we do, like the problem that we're trying to solve. And so a lot of, I think, the work that I've been doing in a new market is just education about what is affordable housing, who lives in these houses. When you talk to new people who are like, what, you're going to have 8 adults live in the same house? Who wants to live in that kind of house? People cannot imagine that this is just, it could be really wonderful housing for people who really need it. And so I think that's one of the biggest problems, is just getting over the perception of what we're doing and getting people to humanize the people who live in these properties.
One thing that you could do, and maybe you probably do this or something similar, where it's like you show affordable housing, like a typical affordable housing, like one of those like crummy Section 8, 1-bed slumlord type homes. And you can say, yeah, you could live here for $1,500 a month. Or you can live, and you show like the really nice PadSplit house with all the amenities and all that stuff, and the community and the pizza parties and all that kind of stuff. Or you can live here for 700. Choose your pick.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely, I think the whole co-living industry has to deal with a lot of those questions. And honestly, that's why we love PadSplit, is because you guys are like the pioneers in the space, and you guys are basically like got your machetes out and bushwhacking through everything for us.
Yeah.
And we're just like making a clear path for us to follow through. So we appreciate that. And so because we're so appreciative as hosts, and what is the best way for a PadSplit host to be the best PadSplit host from PadSplit's perspective? Like, I'm sure you've got your people you love and the people that you wouldn't mind seeing leave your platform. So what distinguishes those two, and how do we be better?
That's a great question. I think what maybe everybody has to zoom out, and I'm a real estate investor too, is to look at, like, basically this is people and numbers, right? And so I think sometimes we focus so much on the numbers and we forget about the people. And so when you really zoom out and say, okay, I recognize this is a problem, I could be a part of the solution, I want to be a part of the solution, I think it's sort of like not getting overly in your head about all the problems and the people issues, and somebody is going to complain about somebody took his food or what. I think if you could really just understand that, like, people need housing, people are having challenges around this, you could be someone who could help a lot of people. You could also make money at the same time. And then if this works for you, you can do more and more of that, right? And it's a positive sort of flywheel. But again, it's like getting your mindset right about what are you actually doing, right?
Yeah. I love that. I think if we can all come from this as a perspective of like, I'm not PadSplit's customer, I'm not their client, I'm their partner. We're business partners. They're providing a platform, we're providing the operational services, and together we solve the affordability crisis. Yeah, thank you, Suzanne, for describing that. And honestly, this has been a really fantastic episode, and I might have to have you take a lie detector test, Suzanne. I don't know if you've been working for PadSplit for just 3 months.
Oh,
it seems like you know quite a bit about it. So they do either a great job training or you're a great learner.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind.
Miller, you ready to move on?
Let's move on.
You know what time it is?
It is time for
the big three. Boom.
Boom.
Hey, Suzanne. Other than PadSplit, what's one tool or system you use in your business that you couldn't live without?
I've got Claude. I just started
Yeah.
using Claude and I'm obsessed with it. So yeah, Claude is amazing.
Miller's
Awesome.
smiling ear to ear. He's like,
Yeah,
"Wait a
you're not
second,
unique there. The
I thought that
number
was
of
my girlfriend."
Claude's my girlfriend. Okay.
I
All right.
just started.
Question number 2.
I just started using. Sorry, I just started using Whisper.
Mm.
It with like Claude, and it's
Oh,
a game
wow.
changer. Yeah.
Yeah.
That-
Pro tip. Yeah. So Craig, actually, I just emailed you about it like 30 minutes ago. Did you see that?
No.
Okay, I was just recommending that you use Whisper, so that's awesome. So yeah, there's
Oh,
this app called Whisper Flow, and you can get it on your phone also. I don't know if you have it on there, Craig, but either on your phone and on your computer. And it's like a dictation thing, like you type to it, or you talk to it and it types. But it actually like formats bulleted lists, so like I can write out an email with my voice without having to go back and touch it up. So yeah, bonus tool for you.
boom.
Boom. All right. Question number 2. Or actually from your perspective, maybe this is more of asking about the operators that you've worked with and you've helped get their properties set up. What's one purchase, renovation, or housemate horror story that you've heard? And what did that teach you, or what did that teach the operator?
I think one of the stories that I recently heard was there was a host who basically didn't turn on like the activation notices, and there was just like a communication error when the person actually moved in. And all of this to say that this was not a good member who probably should not have been in this type of housing, but for whatever reasons, they got opportunity to move in, and the information that they had put into the system was not accurate and true.
Mm.
So all of that to say, like the host had to deal with a tenant who was really not in the right mind space and had to find like another housing option for them because they weren't in the right mind space to be able to move in. And that was a horrible example of the first taste of them coming onto the platform. But I think that's the reality of what can actually happen, right? If you're dealing with many different type of people, 1 in 10 may not be a good fit, right? Or may not be the right person for you. And that's just the risk that all of us landlords take. And it's really unfortunate. But I think what the host learned from that is like to do their better screening. So PadSplit does screening and we do things like employment verification, but we always advise hosts to do another layer, like a phone interview with every member before approving them.
Gotcha. Yeah, it can be, from my perspective, it has been difficult to suss out like crazy from an application.
Yes.
For lack of a better word. So, but there are things that you can do. Yeah, a phone interview, I think that's a good way to get a little bit of a peek into maybe how they are as people and how they would interact in a community. The landlord references, like that's another thing that PadSplit probably doesn't do by default, but that would be a great additional layer, and you can find find the crazy that way. So awesome. That sounds great.
Awesome. Suzanne, outside of this podcast and our co-living community on Facebook, where are you learning the most about co-living today?
I'm not very creative on this, but I listen to Diary of a CEO a lot. And so I really love all that content. Yeah.
Yeah. What's his name? Steve Bartlett. He's a good podcaster. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. All right. And last question for you, Suzanne. Where can listeners find you if they're interested in joining PadSplit or maybe just connecting and asking some questions about co-living in general? Where can listeners find you, learn more about you, and connect with you directly?
Yeah, the easiest way is you can find me on Instagram. It's just my first and last name, Suzanne Vetillart. That's where I talk about my life and background and my way of thinking about real estate investing. I'm a person who's pivoted careers many different times, and I've moved and lived in different places. I was recently living in Thailand last year. And so what I like to share with my investors is I oftentimes can see what other people miss. And I think the thing that people miss right now or don't see is co-living and PadSplit. I think that's the opportunity that I'm paying attention to myself and that I think investors, early adopters in new markets should be looking at.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Awesome. All right, Suzanne, thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything that you know, which is a lot. And so super excited to see Seattle take off on PadSplit and super glad to see where you take this thing. So thanks again for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, awesome. We'll talk soon, Suzanne.
Thanks.
And that was Suzanne. We might just call her Suzanne, like Roxanne.
There we go.
Suzanne, turn on the red light.
Not the show.
Not the
Oh,
show.
no, that's Roxanne.
Roxanne. Suzanne. Roxanne.
Okay. Yes.
There's a show, there's a song. No, there's Roseanne, there's Roxanne, and now there's Suzanne.
There we go.
If Roseanne and Roxanne had a baby, it would probably be Suzanne.
That's right.
Or not. I don't know. All right. Miller, what'd you think? Suzanne.
I'm just glad to finally know what's going on with PadSplit, right? Me and Craig are out here talking about co-living every week, and a large percentage of you guys do use PadSplit. And personally, we don't. So it's so good to kind of hear it from the source, kind of understanding how PadSplit works. What the heck is the membership agreement? What the heck are these different markets that they're in? She was even talking a little bit about how they rent weekly versus monthly. We didn't get a ton into that, but there's a lot of unique things about PadSplit compared to other rental strategies, but definitely even compared to the solo operators that are off PadSplit. So good to get clarity around all that.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, it was good. It was really good. I feel like we know enough about PadSplit to be dangerous, but I feel like she really shared some really sweet insights. And yeah, again, like if you're interested in PadSplit and you want to scale, make sure you're talking with your host manager at PadSplit. They're your partner. Talk with whoever your Suzanne is to help grow your business. Yeah, Miller, anything else you want to go before we get out of here for the day?
No, I'm ready to get out of here.
All right. Follow us on Instagram if you don't already. I'm Craig Kurlop.
I'm Miller McSwain.
And we'll see you
next time.